Today, I'm going to do the main presentation, and Roy will chime in from time to time with comments. I was joking with him earlier, if I don't know the answer to something, I'll hand it over to him. But of course, Roy and I have worked together for many years and have done many presentations together, so we kind of know what each other is thinking about various topics. So with that, I'm going to go to share screen, and I'm going to pause 2 or 3 times throughout the presentation. It was just probably about 40 minutes or something like that, but I'll pause 2 or 3 times as I go through to see if you have any questions. And Judy has promised to interrupt me if there are questions from me, because I don't have my chat on my screen. So Judy, please feel free to interrupt anytime with that. Roy, I'd also invite you, if you would like to interrupt and comment on anything that I say as I go through, please do, because I think you always have something valuable to add.
Thank you.
So here's my here's the topic today. We talked about quality of life. Roy went into quite some detail about quality of life as a paradigm in the last session, and today what I want to do is to focus a little bit more specifically on how you can go from that paradigm in your mind and move it into action, and particularly those of you who are involved in support for people with disabilities, how exactly you would apply that in your work. So I'm going to try to give you some ideas on how to do that today. So this is generally what we're going to be learning about. Well, just review very briefly. I'm going to review very briefly in lay terms what the quality of life paradigm is. And the main part of the presentation here today will be on how to use 3 sources of information to assess how we can improve quality of life. And those 3 sources of information I'm going to use are published research, formal assessment that we might do, and informal assessment. So I'm going to kind of divide the presentation into those 3 areas. Little person you see on the right, I tried to select somebody who's kind of multicultural here, and I'm going to use this a real life example, someone that I worked with many years ago, but his life is still relevant to everything I say in quality of life. His name is Brian, so I'm going to be referring to Brian once in a while, and this little icon that you see here on the right will represent Brian. So he will be in a sort of a continuous example throughout our work today. So as I said, Roy gave some rather some formal and more in-depth ideas of what a paradigm is, what quality of life paradigm is. But generally, in lay terms, a paradigm is how we look at something and how we deal with it. So it's our whole approach to something. So when we're talking about quality of life, we're talking about using quality of life as the main way we look at disability services, and actually the whole field of intellectual and developmental disabilities. And just as important, or maybe more important, is then how we deal with that. What do we do about it? What do we how do we apply that? How do we change our field? Oh, interesting. I I didn't mean to set that up like that, but it's all coming on in an interesting way. So a little more detail here. The way we look at the quality of life paradigm, in general, what we want to start changing in our minds is disability services are an opportunity for us to increase or improve people's quality of life. That's our main purpose. That's our main mandate. That's what we're here for. That's what we have the opportunity to do. And as I said, just as important or more important perhaps is what we do about that, how we deal with it, how we apply it. We're going to be thinking today about how we change policies, how we change our service structures, our organizations and our agencies that we work in, the procedures that we use within those organizations, and as well, all of the personal interactions that we use as professional people, because we're always interacting and talking with people. these things all need to be aligned, and they all need to be supporting people's improved quality of life. So that's kind of a big mouthful, but that's the importance of going past just accepting the way we look at something to moving into, okay, let's make sure we're actually putting this into practice in a daily, not only a daily basis, but a minute by minute basis. So in our minds, the quality of, and in our actions, the quality of life paradigm looks at enhancing or improving the quality of life of people with intellectual disabilities. Not only that, but we're not just focusing on enhancing and maintaining, but also assessing what is already contributing to quality of life and to maintain those parts. So very often in our services, we say, oh, something's working, or we've set something up and it's working fine, so we don't have to focus on that anymore. But we do. For quality of life, we do have to focus on those things, because those are very often the things that add quality already, and we need to maintain those. So in order to move into the quality of life paradigm in an applied way, we need to change things along the way. So basically, we need to start with how we think, what's inside our heads here. So we need to think of changing the way we think, and that's what you have been doing in these webinars up till now, and hopefully you'll do it a little bit more today. What we also need to change the policies that drive our field. And these are sometimes government policies, but they're very often your agency policies or your department policies, things that you think are important because of your mandate and the way you're set up. But what I'm going to challenge you to do today is to question whether those are, to the degree to which those policies that you have already set up are actually improving or enhancing the quality of life of people with disabilities. If not, those are things that need to be tweaked and changed. And same with the structures that we've said. Very often, we've set up mandates because we're funded in a certain way, or because people thought it'd be a good idea to set up your organization in a certain way. And so we have agencies and organizations all have structures, and sometimes we get so embedded in those structures that it's difficult for us to think, okay, maybe those structures aren't the ones that are 100% supporting the enhancement of quality of life. Maybe we're following those structures just because they're structures, and we all fall into those habits, because it's much easier to just keep doing what you used to do than to question whether you could make it better and make those changes. So perhaps most important is how we interact with and support people with intellectual disabilities themselves. I'm talking about individuals and their families. So our personal interactions here are paramount. Sometimes it's kind of helpful to think of these in concentric circles, because in our in our broader field of human services, we're very familiar with these concentric service circles. So in the center here, I have Brian, and the yellow represents Brian and his world, just around him. The green circle represents the environment and environments that Brian operates in, and the blue circle represents the broader environment, our sociocultural environment where we live. And our thinking really needs to change in all of these areas. We need our policy changes generally occur outside of just the person, and as well as the structures that support Brian and his family. Those structures are usually a little bit, not always part of Brian's world. And I often found this in my young years when I was a frontline worker myself, is that people didn't understand the structures and the policies that govern those structures because they weren't really relevant to their lives. Like, why are we doing that? So as professionals, we can get kind of caught up in policies and structures, but how relevant those are to the people we support and in actually enhancing their lives is something we need to continuously ask ourselves. Changing the environment, yes. And of course, our interaction and support personally, most of our activity occurs here with individuals. So, as I say, we're going to focus today mostly on generally assessing how to use the quality of life paradigm. And here we go. So when we start out here, some questions you need to kind of ask yourself. What is your focus? What do you want it to assess? Why are you doing the assessment? And what is it you want to change? And that kind of depends on where you are and where you're coming from. If you're people like Roy or me, you're kind of focusing a little bit more interesting on changing people's thinking because I'm not a frontline worker. I don't work in an agency. I'm a professor. Actually retired, but a part-time professor, and do work like this, do webinars and so on and so forth. But I'm mostly interested in changing people's thinking. Those of you who have positions of management in organizations are more interested perhaps in looking at the policies and structures, and those of you who are frontline workers, as I was at one time in my younger career, are more interested in how to interact well with people with disabilities, how to support them to improve their quality of life, and very often how to change the immediate environments around them so that their quality of life is better. So you need to think of where you're coming from, what you can do, and what you can influence. I'm not saying that if you're a frontline worker, you can't influence policies and structures, because you can. You can speak up, you can talk to people, you can introduce new ideas to your colleagues and so on. And the same if you're in management, you can do a great deal to influence your frontline workers. So there is some overlap there too. But asking these questions about, why are you doing it? What is your focus? And what is it that you can change are important questions to ask right at the beginning. So the three, as I mentioned earlier, there are three areas that we're going to look at here for assessment evidence. Where can you get ideas for what to assess and how useful those might be? So we'll look at first published research. You can look there. That's helpful to many people. You can look at, you can do a formal assessment, you can do an informal assessment. So those are the three things we'll look at. So first of all, in published research, there's a lot of published research around it. Increasingly, there's a lot of published research in quality of life and family quality of life. So those of you who are students or postdocs will have looked at this fairly recently, if you were interested in quality of life. And there's a great deal that we can learn from that. The published research tends to use formal tools to collect data and to measure quality of life. These are validated tools mostly. There's not very much literature just on individuals and how to interact with individuals in the academic literature, but this kind of research results can be very useful still, particularly for policy change, for organizational change, for changing the structures in your organization, and for looking at populations of people with intellectual disabilities on the whole. And I'm going to give you an example here in the next few slides of a family quality of life research that both Roy and I were very much involved in. And we will, through that, look at how specifically you can bring about policy change, organizational change, and look at how people in general with intellectual disabilities function. Well, in this case, we're looking at populations of families. So in this study, Roy and I and a group of other people first published family quality of life questionnaire in the year 2000, and revised it in 2006, and it's still being used quite widely here and there. trying to get these people, get ourselves out of the way. So what I'm going to show with you now is the results from 13 countries. These are studies from Australia, Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Canada, India, Israel, Italy, Japan, Malaysia, Nigeria, Poland, Slovenia, and the United States. So you can see there are in these 13 studies of different numbers of people in each study, that they represented many countries around the world. So it's a very international group of information here. In the family quality of life tool, we look at 9 different areas of family life, and these are called the domains. And so the domains that we measured are family health, the finances of the family relationships, how is the family supported by other people? How's the family supported by services? What about cultural and spiritual values for the family? How does that influence the family functioning? People's careers and schooling, the leisure and recreation that the family enjoys, and the degree to which families are interact with other people and other resources in their communities. So we measured 6 different things: attainment, satisfaction, importance, opportunities, initiative, and stability. I'm going to be talking about the ones that are highlighted in yellow: attainment and satisfaction. What this means is, for example, in support from services, let's say, attainment would ask, to what degree do you get the services that you wish for and need? And the satisfaction question would ask, how satisfied are you with the services you get? The reason I'm going to put these together is our numbers came out such that the scores on these two were very, very highly correlated. So I just combined them, so it's a little easier for us to look at. Now we'll look at the results. As you can see here, I've listed all the 13 countries here on the right, but as you can see, oh, Judy, can you see my cursor moving?
Yes, we can see your cursor there, Ivan. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if I could just see it on my screen or if all of you did.
No, we can see it.
I'm showing you things with my cursor, and I was just assuming that you could look at it. Okay, as you can see from here, that I'm going to ignore this white line at the bottom for a minute, because this study was done in Italy in an institution that housed seniors. And the results of it were really quite different, because it was a rather specialized population. The other populations from all the other countries were people who lived with their families primarily and got community services. As you can see, that almost everything is important to almost everybody, but the attainment and satisfaction scores were considerably lower than the importance scores. And the initiative is, do you take action to improve your life? And opportunities ask for, are there opportunities for you to improve your life? And stability, which is, as you can see, a little bit more mixed across the various studies, asked how likely are things to change in the future. So what I wanted to show you this one for is to point out that really all of those 9 domains are really important. Like, everybody scored them between 4 and 4.6, so they're all important to everybody. So okay, so I just want to show you, because here in these studies, really everything was kind of important, but I just wanted to show you how we generally looked at quality of life. If something is important to you and you're very satisfied, you have it, you have attained it, or you're satisfied with it, this is the area we think of as a very good quality of life, or very effective quality of life. Something is really important to you, but you have not attained it, and you're not satisfied with that, you're very displeased with it, then then that's an area that is detracting from your quality of life. It's important to you, but you don't have it. And that's something that we need to focus on. If things are not so important to you, whether you have them or not, it doesn't affect your life so much because they're not so important to you. And so anyway, I just want you to kind of keep that in mind as we go through, as we look at the results here. So these are the results of the combined attainment and satisfaction scores for all of the studies here. You can see there's a remarkable trend in the first four domains that we look at: health, finances, family relations, and this means support from other people. This one, the next one, is support from services, values, careers, leisure, and community interaction. What we can see from this is that in all these countries of all around the world, they every single one, almost every single one, if not every single one, rated family relations as the highest score in attainment and satisfaction. Finances down a little bit. Health, surprisingly for most countries, was pretty good. It's a little shocking, but support from other people was rated as very low in attainment and satisfaction in literally every country where a study was carried out. Support from services, as you can say, was much more mixed. Some countries, the the influence of values is really important. In a few countries, not quite so, not quite so much attained. Um, Careers, likewise, although they kind of goes up and down from one country to the other, and the same with the other two domains. So let's look then at what this means for actual usage or applying this. Just to remind you that we're looking at research data here, and it's really big picture stuff. So it's really more important for policy change, organizational change, or looking at like large populations. If we see all of those populations like you see here, all of those populations in 13 countries, all rating attainment satisfaction of family relations highest, then you doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case within your agency, but it suggests that it very well might be. And the same with the trends in the other um, domains that we look at. So why am I having trouble with that thing? So what does this mean for what you do for policy change or organizational change? Well, you want to support and enhance the areas that provide the most satisfaction and that people already have to a fair degree, but they're really happy that way. And in this case, family relations, countries that have good health, spiritual values here, services for some countries. Look at those ones and say, okay, those are already working well. Those are the things that probably are adding quality already to their lives. Those are the things that we need to continue to support. We need to, number two, examine the things that are needed for change in policy and organizational change. And here you need to come up with some idea. I'm just giving you the ideas of where to start, but not the actual ideas of what you need to do. But support from other people is an area here that is problematic for attainment status. People are not happy. They don't have it as much, and they're not so happy about that. Finances are the same for people in some countries. So their question there for policy change, for organizational changes. Okay, so what might we be able to do about that? What do we need to change here that would make these ratings come up higher? What needs to change here to make these ratings better? What could we do within our organization, within our agency, to address that? So those are the questions you need to ask, and then come up with some very specific answers to those questions, and then just put them into practice, or convince the powers that be to put into practice, which is sometimes a little bit more of a problem. A few other things. We also measured opportunities in decision making in most quality of life work, and so sometimes these things, for example, low support from other people occurs simply because you don't provide opportunities, or the way things are set up, there just aren't opportunities to do it. And or sometimes it's because there are a few opportunities there, but the person doesn't really have any power to make a decision to go ahead and do it. And or they're not encouraged to take the initiative to do it. So 3, 4, and 5 are all things that we need to do as well to support our actions in numbers 1 and 2. So just before we start the next part, formal assessment, are there any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Roy.
I've got a few things that came up, and if I may, I'll just go through them straight. And if you want to make comments or others do. But as you were talking, there's several things that came to mind for me. And that first one would be, how will we deal with what we think about our own perceptions and values in relation to people we work with? And I think that's important. And one example would be, I was presenting with my wife, actually, up in our province, and a big question arose. Staff suddenly pointed out in our discussion about what was going on that they didn't feel that their person who was in charge of their unit really showed enough care for the persons they were responsible for. And of course, the person who was the coordinator was very upset by this and said, well, of course not, because I'm the administrator, I'm not their mother. And the lies in that remark a major concern of how we treat people who we're supporting and trying to nurture and grow. And so we need to think about what are our perceptions and what are our approaches and what should they be. The next one is, what does quality of life mean to our clients? What do the people we work with actually feel about what they want and what they have in terms of their own quality of life? And then the next one would be, arose out of something that I was doing, and I mentioned before we started, that I did some work with Camp Hill, and I was asked to see about a situation that had arisen in a Camp Hill home in relation to the local government. And there have been some research reports about the damage of high intensity traffic near homes for people with autism. And one person had put in that you really couldn't research the area, and there had been little research carried out in relation to these types of situations with people with autism. And I was the person on the other side and said, well, I don't understand why you've said that. It is true that you can't do research where you change a lot of variables if there are ethical things involved. For example, with autism, you couldn't change noise levels a lot and see how they reacted, because that would be unethical, knowing their sensitivities. But as I said to the tribunal that I had to appear before, there are other ways of doing research. You don't have to do it with the control groups and so on. You can do it just by observation. And this is a very important tool in that area. And I pointed out to them that Darwin's work in a totally different field was done largely by recording observation. So bear in mind the types of research that might take on. And then there's a comment that I'm always going on about. I get worried when a large number of people respond to the diagrams that make the ratings for various quality of life on the satisfied or never not dissatisfied. There are a lot of people who say, well, I'm neither satisfied or dissatisfied. And many people put those in the positive group, whereas I put them in the negative group. And why I do this in terms of rating is because if I want to intervene or anybody intervenes, we don't want people just saying they're neither satisfied or dissatisfied. We're expecting and hoping the results will be satisfactory or very satisfactory. And if you take these examples, you find that a large number of people are in the three bottom rankings, namely neither satisfied or dissatisfied, dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. So I think we've got to be careful of not exaggerating all the positive things. And finally, I want to point out, because it's related, but these studies that we've all been involved with are generally with general samples of families with a person with a disability. But what kind of disability? And if you look at, as I've done, the differences between three groups: families that don't have a child with disability, people who have a child with autism, and those who have children with Down syndrome. And it's very clear that the most with the quality of life are those without people with disabilities. Those with Down syndrome are the next. And right below them, right across these characteristics, come autism. And I can give one example, which I love examples coming up, which support research. I said to when we went through the data of respondents, I said to my research assistant, I do not understand why this person with Down syndrome rates lower than all the other people with Down syndrome as a family. So could you go back and have a chat with the mother? And the mother said, oh, well, I only responded for Down syndrome because I got the invitation from the Down Syndrome Society. In fact, I have a child with autism as well, immediately explaining why that person rated things much lower in generally than people who just have Down syndrome. Ivan, I'm taking a lot of time. Sorry about that, but here, these are the comments I've written down during this stage, and people might want to think about them.
Okay, well, no problem at all, Roy. Thank you very much. Those are very valuable thoughts. I'll just continue on then to the second part of assessment and how we're going to use that for improving quality of life, and that is formal assessment. And formal assessment focuses more on larger populations as well, but it can also, as you can see here from my writing in red, really be useful for when we're talking about improving individuals' quality of life. Generally, formal assessment is done by an agency or an organization because they have a question about, perhaps they want to do assess their the way their organization works. They're doing a little bit of evaluation there, or formal assessment can also be done because it's mandated by governments or something like that. But in general, formal assessments are carried out by, usually not by frontline workers, but by other organizations. I'm going to give some examples of that and how they can be put into practice. As I mentioned earlier, formal assessment tool are usually uses validated tools, and here are some very common ones. Quality of life questionnaire that was first originated by Bob Chalock and Ken Keith, and has gone through a few iterations over time. The quality of life profile that I was involved with my colleagues at the University of Toronto was developed in the 1990s, and that's still being used in some countries around the world. This third one was developed by Roy Brown and his colleagues at the University of Calgary. Bob Cummins in Australia has done a great deal of work on quality of life and life satisfaction. And of course, the family quality of life survey I referred to a few minutes ago was developed by myself, Roy, and a large group of other international scholars. Anyway, there are a lot of instruments around. A great many of them are validated and very useful for different purposes. If you want to find a comprehensive list, really one of the best ones ever was developed by Bob Cummins, who runs this website, and I guess it's kind of an information center, the Australian Center for Quality of Life. And there's the website right there. So when we're looking at what I want to focus on here is when you're doing a formal assessment, you can use it for all the same purposes I just talked about from research. You can look at the trends. Let's just pretend here, this is the same chart I showed you before, but let's just pretend for a few minutes that these are the results from your organization, not countries here, but that these are different families within your organization. You can look at the overall trends and use them in exactly the same way that you use research data. We can also use them for improving individual quality of life, as I said. So what I've done here on this chart was I've superimposed in dark red on top the results from Brian's family. And as you can see that an individual family might differ rather considerably from the overall results when you combine the results of all the families together. In this case, Brian has a fair number of health problems, and there's some other health problems in his family. So this part, attainment and satisfaction and health, were rated very low in contrast to most of the other results. His family actually has quite a lot of money. They're very well-to-do family. So this finances, unlike many families that have disability in the family, were not a problem at all as far as they have it. They're completely happy that way, and so on. They have good family relationships like most other families. And actually, they have a fairly good network of relatives and friends who are very supportive. And so this is not such a problem either. And as you can see, then so on and so forth for the other domains. My point here is that you can take an individual, even though you're using a formal tool, you could take the results from that formal tool, and you not only can but should, and look at the results for that individual family or that individual person, and don't necessarily assume that because this is low for most family and support from other people, that that's the case for Brian. So you need to look at the individual case. And I wanted to just share with you from our own scheme of things for individual quality of life. We developed this 9-domain scheme, which we divided into being, belonging, and becoming. The 9 areas of life that we looked at for families or for individuals were their physical health, emotional health, spiritual health. Under belonging, where people live, the people in their lives, and all of the things around them. And under becoming, the things they do during the day, the things they do for fun and enjoyment, and the things that they do for growth and development. So those are 9 areas that we looked at. I'm showing you those because I'm going to show you some results from Brian. Here we're looking at the questions from Practical Becoming, and these were the actual items on the questionnaire here. And here are the results for Brian, how important things are to him and how satisfied. Now, I said before that if you look at the overall results, you see, well, okay, everything is important to everybody. So, so we can just assume everything is important, but it's not. If you look at the individual level, you'll see that at individual items for individual people, you will see that that's not at all the case, and it really affects what you should do and what you should apply. So you can see here that Brian thinks it's really important to help other people, and he loves helping other people. He loves running errands for people. Ask him to do something, he's in seventh heaven. He's just really happy doing that one. Going to the places, having to go to the grocery store, or go to the drugstore to pick up the stuff, or whatever he has to do. That's important to him. He loves doing it. So these are pretty good areas. But things that are not quite so important to him are looking after himself. His personal hygiene and the way he dresses was not that important to him, but he's perfectly happy that way. So, we just need to think of that. Keeping his home neat and clean, also not so important to him, and he's perfectly happy that way. His job, he did have a job. He worked as in maintenance in a factory, and it was he was iffy about how important it was, and he was kind of iffy about how satisfied. So what do those things mean in terms of the scheme over here on the right? How does it fit into that scheme? So what should you do? What exactly should you do to improve somebody's quality of life? Well, you want to support some things because they already add quality. So helping others, number 38, this is the main thing. You need to look at this and say, okay, this is something you need to keep doing, and you need to keep supporting that, because this is already something that adds quality. This is in this category. I should probably have added number 39 there too. 38 and 39. There's another reason you need to add, because it could add quality, and that is number 41. Sorry, I forgot to mention this before. Something that's really, really important to Brian is he really, really, really wanted to have a dog. And that was something he was very important to him. And he was just constantly asking and thinking about how that might happen. And he was really displeased that he didn't have a dog. And it's just something he really, really wanted to do. So in support for Brian, this was one of Roy's points here earlier, was what's important to him? What does he want to do? What would improve his life? Well, this is one thing. So looking at number 41 for improving, can he get a pet? If he can't get a dog for some reason, can he get another pet? Those are questions we need to really look at here. Okay, there's some things that are not very good for us. This is where your professional values or your parental values might come into it, but they're okay, and they're really not very important to Brian. So looking after him, looking after his home and looking after himself, they were not so important to him. But even though we might look at him and always be nagging him or trying to think of ways to get him to improve, that's not probably going to add to his quality of life, because they're not really very important to him. And the same with his job. It's not a really strong priority for him. So all our efforts to try to make him do it and so on are probably going to fall on deaf ears. So what I'm doing here is saying, by looking at individual items for an individual person, how important they are and how satisfied they are, and considering this simple, at least 4 little faces, happy, sad, and in between, we can think of exactly what to do, what we should be supporting, what we should be spending our time on as a professional person who's supporting that person to maximize their quality of life. We shouldn't forget that we should also assess choice. So I've said, well, what else can I do? And this is a similar kind of a little scheme for deciding. Actually, Roy and I used this in an article in 2009 that we wrote on choice making. We looked at how many options are available to you, and how much decision making are you doing. So generally, choice is best when you have a number of options available to you, and you get to choose pretty much among those options what it is you want to do. Choice is really the lowest the worst or the least desirable when there are down here on the bottom left, when the number of options is very low or non-existent, but and somebody else is making that decision for you. So we're talking about breakfast. We're saying, in this case, okay, Brian, what do you want for breakfast today? And you have 17 things in your kitchen, which he knows about, and he can choose which one it is. Down here, the question is, here's your breakfast, Brian, and set it down in front of him. Now, just a little point here. Remember that not everybody wants a lot of choice, and some people don't want too many options. If you have too much, too often, it can be stressful for people to have to pick one out of 17. Sometimes it's better to pick one out of two. Those of you who have children or had in the past know this little thing. What time do you want to go to bed? 9 o'clock or 9:10? And by giving a little choice like that, the person thinks they have power, but you're really not giving them very much choice. But if you say, if you give them 10 options, they would take a lot longer to make up their minds, and it might be stressful for them. So similarly, when you're assessing choice, very same as when you're assessing importance and satisfaction, if you look at what the individual is saying and what each what the specific items on the questionnaire are saying, then you can think of what to do. So in this case, being close to family members, he's got lots of opportunities, and he's got lots of personal choice about what he does when he interacts with them. Um, so those are things that are already there, and you probably should be supporting that, supporting those opportunities and choice very much. There's some things you could improve opportunities for a special person. Brian really, really, really wanted to get married because his two brothers and his two sisters were all married and had young children, and he really wanted to get married himself, but he had a little trouble forming relationships that lasted very long. So that was a little drawback for him, but it was something he really wanted to do, and he didn't have very many opportunities for meeting possible partners. So something you focus on is in just improving those opportunities. Number 23 here, we see opportunities and choice for both. One, Brian actually really wanted to know people, in his neighborhood, but he had very few opportunities for knowing his neighbors, and nobody was giving him any decision making about how to do that. So that's something that could be done. But anyway, my point here is, by looking at the opportunities that are there and the choices that are there, for one individual, for specific items on even a formal questionnaire can be very, very helpful. I think it's a good idea to record exactly then how you would do that. So here's a little chart that you could use for Brian or anybody. Is you want to support something because it adds quality. So from the former assessment here, you can list a few things that you really, really want to continue to support, but then make a plan about how exactly you're going to do that, and how you're going to know that it's working. Other things maybe you need to do or could do because they may add quality to his life. In this case, knowing his neighbors, having more opportunities to meet a special person, maybe more opportunities to do activities with other people. These may or may not work out because they're not strong parts of his life already, but providing those opportunities, how to do it, list exactly how you might do those things. Okay, I want to, because of time, I want to just quickly do the third part of the assessment, which is informal assessment. in informal assessment, I want to um, just say, first of all, that we're probably not using formal tools here. We're using other methods, observation, recording, and mostly ideas that are going into your mind. So we're mostly using informal assessment for improving individuals' quality of life. Just a little point to start off with is that all good professionals do this all the time anyway. All professionals are constantly assessing in an ongoing way. You're never not assessing. You're always kind of thinking, okay, is this working? What is he like? What's working well? Why isn't it working well? What are the barriers? So on and so forth. You know this as professionals yourself. So on this slide, I just wanted to point out that um, that here, as an example, what would Brian have for breakfast? You want to kind of point out every day. Does he want the same thing for breakfast every day? Does he prefer? Is he making a choice? Does he have a lot of opportunities to choose from? Um, what 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 does he like? What does he not like? What is he saying? What is he showing about his likes and dislikes? Are you providing him with too many choices, too many opportunities, and so on and so forth? So you can be constantly thinking of that in the way he reacts to a situation. I also encourage people to keep a record of things because, particularly if you're a frontline worker in an agency, you can be very busy and you can have a lot of people and you can sort of forget who's done what. But I like to sort of think of things that are important to the person and important to your agency, and just keep a list of those, and then jot down a word or two sometimes about how satisfied the person is. And these happy faces and sad faces and neutral faces are designed to be a shortcut to reminding yourself whether they're adding to the quality of life, in which case you could just circle the happy face, or whether they're detracting and need to be improved, which you can just circle this one, or whether they don't matter so much, you can circle one of those. So you can keep various forms of records, but I encourage all frontline people to keep these kinds of records that work towards supporting quality of life. So the research and the formal kinds of assessment, they target the things that are most important to groups and the things that are most important to most people. But a little point I keep I keep talking about to groups over and over is that what formal assessment always misses, and really has, just by its very nature, really can't address much, are the things that are really unique to individual people. And sometimes those things are extraordinarily important in people's lives. I'm going to just show you tell you a few examples here of what I'm talking about. Okay, people, you go up here. Here, up in the top left here is my nephew, Roger. Roger learned to play guitar when he was about 12 years old. And I'm not kidding. Between practicing, learning new things on his own, sometimes taking lessons, teaching, he has 40 pupils, and performing, because he performs about 3 or 4 nights a week. He probably spends at least 3/4 of his waking hours on his music. This is something that is really a driving force in his life. It's what gets him up in the morning. It's what propels him through the day. It's what he does almost mostly during the day. He does other things, of course, too, but this is the main thing of his life. It's the main thing that identifies him. It's when you ask him what he's about, he says he's about his music. This is that kind of thing is not ever captured in a quality of life tool because it's not designed to be that way. Here I have a baby goat. And you might wonder why I put a baby goat here. Well, I'm going to use continue with people I know. My nephew, Patricia, and her family are queer people, but they live on a farm in the country, and they had a baby goat who lived in their bathroom. And you and I might say, "Oh, why would you have a baby goat living in your bathroom?" But their whole family loves animals, and they have they have like a zoo of animals in their barn and all around in their fields. But baby goats are very susceptible to some wild animals we have in Canada, particularly coyotes and wolves and foxes. So they had the baby goat living in their bathroom in their house for a long time. These things, I would never have a goat living in my bathroom. I don't know how many of you would, but it seems rather odd. But to their family, that was a really, really, really important thing, and something that really added quality to their life for a few months, because it it added it, it was just a really special thing for them to be able to raise a goat and to keep it safe from harm. Over here on the Joy Half Diet, I'm advertising a little book that I wrote this winter, this little COVID project. I lost 16 pounds in 2021 on a diet, so I decided to write a humorous book about it. It's a booklet really. It's only 12 pages of writing and 12 pages of illustrations. But what I wanted to show um, was, you see these illustrations here, they're really good. I paired up with this illustrator I'd never met before, and he's like Roger with his music, but he's like this with his art. He spends like 80-90% of his time drawing and illustrating things, and it's the driving and dominant force in his life. um, that kind of thing is extraordinarily important to him. It's what he's all about. It's what it is his quality of life. Take his art away from him, he's nothing. So these things are not captured in formal things. Brian over here on the right, okay, I'm going to skip the chef. Brian took up when he was a young man, took up figure skating. He saw figure skating on television. He thought it would be a nice thing to do. So he spent years and years and years taking figure skating lessons and competing in Special Olympics, and won quite a few awards for his figure skating. It became a really, really strong and important thing in his life. He forgot all about his dog, and figure skating was his life. Um, so he went to work and he did these other things, but no, this is what he did, and this is what defined him for many years. So um, all in all, what I'm saying to you here is, all of us, almost all of us anyway, have these things that are kind of unique to us, and but they can be extraordinarily important influences in our lives, and they're very important to the way we think of our lives, the way we think of ourselves, what our life is all about, what the meaning of our life here on earth is. And those things are things that need to be explored and captured. And every single person, we need to look at and think, okay, what are those unique things? What is really driving you? Never mind all those other things that drive other people. What is really driving you? What is really going to be quality in your life? Okay, I'm finally finishing here. So just a little recap here. There's In a quality of life paradigm, we need to change things. We need to change our thinking. We need to change our policies, our structures, our environments, the way we interact with people. And what I'm suggesting here is three different uh, sources of assessment information that you can use to learn about how to make those changes, then plan what changes need to be made, and then act on those plans that you've made. So that concludes my presentation, but I had two little additional thoughts that I just wanted to share with you. One is, when you're assessing families, you can look at the family as a whole unit, or you can look at individuals, within the family and add them all up. So those are two quite different things, and each is valid. Second thing I want to point to, just mention, was that what do you do first, second, or third? And this was Roy kindly invited me in 1999 to go to Adelaide, Australia, and this was the basis of my speech there. What you need to do, first of all, in all of those ways of assessing, blah, 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 is look at the basic needs first. What you have to make sure that people's basic needs are looked after first. After that, then you can also focus on the things that add quality to that person's life. And thirdly, the things that help a person transcend the everydayness of life, if I can put it that way, to move beyond just listening to music and enjoying music, to just taking a walk and enjoying nature, that sort of thing where you're always transcending the ordinariness of life. And with that, I shall say thank you. And this was the cartoon that my cartoonist there drew of me for my brief bio at the end of my little booklet that I brought. So I thought I'd share that with you today.
Okay.
I'm finished.
Great. Oh, thank you so much, Ivan, for like a real tour around quality of life. And I think it's just so interesting the way that you've done it, because I think we're all thinking about our own quality of life as well as that of our clients. And really, I think that's the essential point that you're making, is that everybody is entitled to try and achieve the best quality of life possible for themselves. And that last point about finding what it is that really motivates you, keeps you going, that we all need to find that. And we need to look at that for our family members with disabilities and for our clients. So thanks very much. I'll now open the floor to questions. I don't know if you want to come in here, Roy, or if we can just wait for a couple of questions and then get the responses there.
I got just one or two this time. Okay. I think there are some other things that arise. Some of them have been touched on, and Ivan can't touch on everything, but I think has got all the major points. But there is a question about choice and protection. And in some of the work we've done over the years, we often find that parents will restrict activities for some people when the choice is from the individual. Generally, these are young adults who want to do something different. And one example for us would have been, we had a number of people who wanted to ride a bike around the community. Well, I know that depends on the safety of the community, but many males did this, but young women were prevented from doing this. Now, that may be a societal view, but it was also something that restricts women who might wish to learn how to ride a bike. And along with that goes the fact that one needs to try to exploit the possibilities of choice. Because if one does that, then skills start to generalize to other things that the person may not readily go to. So that seems to me an important thing to do. And then there is this last point, though I almost touched on it above. What do you do when parents say one thing and say, oh, no, it's not really the best choice for him. This is the best choice for him or her. What do you do? How do you deal with that type of situation? And I would argue that one needs to help parents either through group meetings. And I've found on the group meetings I've done with parents, they're often very supportive of each other in trying to get around the difficulties of this. And so group meetings can be quite useful. Not only are they cathartic for the parents, but it also helps parents to be supported to allow choices that some people would not wish the person to do when it is their major choice in life. So they're just a few dilemmas that I can add on to what's already been said. And along with that, I think Ivan gave many very good examples of having little blocks of space to actually answer specific questions and aims. And I think looking at many agencies, that amount of detail is not done and should be done in order to design effective programs. Thanks for that, and thanks, Ivan.
Thanks for that addition, Roy. I think all very helpful. I don't see any questions in the chat or any comments. I just see thank you so much for an interesting presentation, and thank you for this great and insightful presentation. So I'm just going to give people a minute or two to think about any comments perhaps you'd like to make. We've got a few minutes. And let me just give you a little bit of space to think about it, either in the chat or put your hand up or open your mic.
Judy, while you're waiting for some responses, a thought suddenly strikes me, and that is people need time to take in these ideas and apply them. I wonder whether down the line one could have another meeting on Zoom to see how people have thought about it and how they are applying it. That would help us all.
I think it's a very good idea. I think that if we don't have any points coming up now, I think that might very well be the case. It was a very absorbing presentation. I think that we have one question here. So let's ask Kath Pitt. She says, do you find that there's a difference in thinking between the younger families with a disabled family member versus the older, under 30-year-olds? Sorry, I'm not... the younger families or the older families? Yeah. I think that's...
Sorry, yeah.
Just a bit, okay? Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, the cutoff of 30 years old. So under 30s being the younger and the older being over. Just with the parental, sort of what Roy was saying now at the end, parental protectiveness versus, just the providing opportunities for people.
Sorry, Ivan, go ahead. This is
I'll just respond briefly and then let you, Roy. I think the main difference here is that younger families have younger children. For the most part, and the older parents tend to have older children, and the issues are really quite different. In my country and many countries around the world now, the services for young children are much more integrated than they were 20 or 30 or 50 years ago. And I mean, very often children, for the most part, children with disabilities are well integrated into preschool programs and elementary schools and secondary schools. So the issues there are more how to do all of those things effectively and what support families can get, as opposed to older families who are, if their children are transitioning into their adult years, their concerns are really quite different. But so I think the point here is that over your life, what's important to you and what is facing you as a family and as individuals within that family change quite a lot over time. And so your quality of life priorities change as well. And we need to be very aware of that when we're assessing and responding to those families and individuals. Roy?
Yeah, I think I'd like to give an example, because I think there are enormous changes, as there are in everyone as they move from childhood into adolescence and into adulthood. And one of the things that tends to happen and should happen is an increased assertiveness. We don't often think about that in relation to development of people with disabilities. And one example I can remember at a meeting of an association, I was invited to talk to it, but it was a meeting of a society dealing with disabilities, and the parents had set up this group. And increasingly, older adults with disability said they wanted to make their decisions and they're part of it. And many parents said, no, this is our society. And the youngsters said, well, we want to play a role in this. And increasingly, people have been included more and more. If you look at the International Down Syndrome Association, young adults are given much more space and room and opportunity to make their own statements. And in a PhD of one of my former students, interviewed directors of boards, and many of them said, oh, well, when there's someone with a disability on the board, it slows us down. But you'd have other people who said, I really begin, now he's on the board, I've learned so much about disabilities, I've changed my views, I've changed my development. I think that sort of thing should be encouraged in a variety of forms. It can be challenging, it means parental and agency discussions, it means inclusion of the person with the disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I think there's one last question we can just take a quick response to. We've run out of time, but let's just hear from Sorrento. Patrick makes the comment that he'd like to see the QL profile on his own son. I think we would too. I think it would be very interesting. I think we'd probably be surprised if we did it. The question from Sorrento, I've read it and I'm going to summarize it for you, is around how do you advocate for quality of life considerations amongst community and schools. It's easier with families, but just beyond that, she asked for some suggestions on how you advocate for quality of life with policymakers and government levels.
Oh, that's a tough question. Well, we're trying to do it here today, and we, you do it all the time. On a personal level, I think this question of constantly framing your questions and your responses and your interactions with other people in such a way that you're always emphasizing to them the quality of life principles. For example, if you're in a school that your son goes to, you can say to the teacher, so how many opportunities are you giving him here to make new friends? And is he deciding this, or is somebody else deciding? By framing the questions, thinking in the quality of life paradigm, you can very often very much influence how other people respond.
Thanks very much.
Administrators are sometimes a little tougher sell, but
great. Well, I think on that note, I think we can conclude our webinar for tonight. And once again, to say thank you so much to Roy and Ivan for not just doing this webinar, but for building this kind of connection between themselves and our efforts here in South Africa, all of us who are in this room and beyond, because we have from other countries as well. So I think that we hope that it won't end here, and we certainly are going to meet with Roy and Ivan next week, or no, not next week, sometime soon, to consider whether there's ways that we could take this further and we could continue to learn more about quality of life and to learn from each other. So please, if you've got any suggestions on what you would like to do and what you would like to see, Roy has already made a suggestion for a webinar where people might come with questions once they've absorbed the information that they've got from today and from other webinars. So please just let us know, and we'll see what we can organize. And once again, just thank you so much to Roy and Ivan. And if you look in the chat, I hope you do, you'll see that there's a great appreciation for your presentation here today. So thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And I just wanted to say that it was a pleasure to be here, and I do appreciate all those comments. I am looking at them in the chart. Thank you very much.
Great. And thank you also to Chantal Samuels and Bongi Mklangu for all the work that they put into setting up that everything worked smoothly this evening. So thanks very much. And I wish you as little load shedding as possible tonight.